Russia has saturated Ukraine with landmines. It's been a key part of Vladimir Putin's strategy as Russia uses mines to protect territory it's occupied and in some cases as booby traps to kill Ukrainian soldiers when Russia is forced to withdraw. In the past, these mines would have been transported, as one would expect, in special vehicles designed to store and lay them. But that's not always the case today. Recently, instances have emerged of Russian soldiers carrying landmines on their backs. This is the bizarre reality Putin's troops now face in Ukraine, and it leaves only one question to ask: why? Well, before getting to that, it's important to cover the proof that Russia's soldiers are physically trying to carry landmines strapped to their chests and backs, on foot, and with no protection. On August 3rd, Euromaidan Press reported that this strange phenomenon has become an increasingly common occurrence across the entire front line. Russian soldiers are literally exploding after Ukraine's drones shoot them down and cook the ammunition that they're carrying. This is new. In the past, Russian soldiers simply fell under drone fire. There could be the occasional explosion, say if a soldier was preparing to throw a grenade. But that was a rarity. Now, Ukraine is finding that more and more of Putin's soldiers are getting blown into smithereens after a drone strike. And any doubts that this is actually happening should be put to rest, because there's footage. Published on X by War Translated, the 49-second video was shot by drones operated by Ukraine's 225th Assault Regiment. Reportedly filmed in Russia's Kursk region, the video highlights precisely what Russia's soldiers are being forced to do as their summer offensive across the border in Ukraine stalls out. The video starts somewhat inconspicuously. Footage is seen of what looks like a wooded area or forest being shot by one of Ukraine's many reconnaissance drones. Music plays in the background as the view switches to a strike conducted by a drone. That attack is par for the course. What looks like a bomb or grenade gets dropped, followed by a big explosion. It's what comes next that's shocking. At around the 30-second mark of the video, the drone is seen capturing footage of a Russian casualty who was likely caught by the explosion caused by the weapon that was just seen get dropped into the wooded area. The drone lingers for a few seconds, then boom, another explosion, only this time it had nothing to do with Ukraine's drones. The Russian soldier seemed to have exploded on his own accord. Euromaidan Press says that the secondary explosion occurred because the Russian soldier had a landmine strapped to his body. What appears to have happened is that the soldier was killed by the drone bomb and fell onto his back. After a few seconds, the mine on his back triggered, blowing the soldier into smithereens and proving once and for all what Ukraine is claiming. Putin's forces are carrying landmines into battle. Which leads back to the question that posed at the beginning of this video. It must have been on the minds of the Ukrainian drone operators that saw this macabre scene play out. Why? It makes no sense. Soldiers aren't expected to carry landmines into battle, and there seems to be no reason, at least on the surface, why Putin's forces are doing it now. However, the reality is that there are several reasons why Russia's soldiers are now carrying landmines on their backs, and they all come back to a feeling that they'll all be feeling as the Ukraine war drags deeper into 2025: desperation. Mentioned earlier was that Ukraine has managed to stall out Putin's summer offensive in Sumy. That was reported by Euronews back on June 27, with the Ukrainian military's commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, lauding his soldiers' accomplishments. Based on the results of May and June, we can say that this year's wave of the enemy's summer offensive from Russian territory is faltering, Syrsky said at the time. What the Ukrainian military head didn't reveal is just how much of a number Ukraine had done on Russia's supply lines as part of the process of stalling the Sumy offensive. Euromaidan Press provides the details, noting that this increasing practice of Russian infantry self-immolating by carrying landmines on their back is happening because of what it dubs the de-mechanization of the Russian armed forces. In short, Russia's troops simply don't have the vehicles they need to transport their landmines, forcing soldiers to either march into battle on foot or if they're lucky, ride toward Ukraine's positions on motorbikes or in civilian vehicles. That mechanization problem will be dug into deeper later in the video. For now, what's clear here is a supply chain problem. Russia needs to get landmines to the front, as it wants to lay them to prevent Ukraine from advancing toward territory Russia occupies. However, some soldiers no longer have access to the specialized vehicles they need to transport their mines. So, they carry them. Cargo trucks are gone, and the soldiers who are left to hold the mines are easy pickings for Ukraine's drone operators. Even if a drone misses, one stumble, one misstep, one fall could lead to an unfortunate Russian soldier triggering the landmine they're attempting to haul to the front. And it gets worse for the Russian forces. Hauling landmines on their backs isn't just a problem for Russia's soldiers in Sumy. On the eastern front near Donetsk, the same behavior has been seen in Lyman. A fortress city that Putin hopes to take as part of his summer offensive, Lyman is being bravely defended by Ukraine's forces. And, just as seen in Sumy, the Russian forces attempting to take that city are so cut off from their supply lines that they're being forced to carry landmines on foot. Russia's situation in Lyman is bad. Euromaidan Press reported on July 31 that Putin's soldiers near the city are hopelessly stuck and have resorted to launching ineffectual infantry assaults. Casualties are occurring at a record rate, and just like in Sumy, the cargo trucks and armoured vehicles needed to transport landmines aren't anywhere to be seen. So, the mines are carried. And the results are the same as discussed in the video earlier. Ukraine's drone crews are hunting Russia's mine carriers down and blowing them to smithereens. Crazily, the Lyman incident seems to have been the one that inspired Russia's new approach to transporting landmines. Euromaidan Press reports that a soldier in the region was filmed running to assault a Ukrainian position with a live grenade in his hand. Ukraine met that soldier with fire. He fell, then the grenade blew up. This painful death inspired the Russian command, leading them to expand on the idea. Soldiers were soon seen wearing specially designed vests meant to carry anti-tank mines, intended as a practical way to carry mines to the front and quickly deploy explosives upon reaching Ukrainian positions, allowing troops to remain armed while carrying the mines, the outlet says. The unfortunate soldier from earlier is believed to be a victim of one of these vests, and many more are bound to end up just like him as Russia leans more heavily into its warped version of innovation. Russia is still failing to breach the Ukrainian defense in Lyman. The same goes for Sumy, only now those failures are having explosive consequences for many of the country's soldiers. And the worst of it is that the situation is unlikely to get any better, which leads back to a problem touched upon earlier in the video: the de-mechanization of the Russian military. In practical terms, it's the lack of appropriate vehicles that is really leading to Russia's soldiers being forced to carry landmines on their backs and chests. And that lack of vehicles is happening for two reasons. Ukraine is destroying anything that Russia sends its way, and Putin doesn't have the vehicles he needs to send replacements. Next up is Pokrovsk, yet another one of the cities that Putin wants to take in his summer offensive. And it's a job that he's dedicated 110,000 soldiers to do. Pokrovsk still hasn't fallen, and there are no confirmed sightings of soldiers in that region carrying landmines on their backs. Yet, that will likely come soon enough, as Lyman isn't far from Pokrovsk, so the problems Russia's soldiers are having there are likely mirrored elsewhere in the Donetsk Oblast. Instead, Pokrovsk offers a microcosm of a much larger problem that Russia faces with its mechanized units. They're getting destroyed in record numbers. Andrew Perpetua highlighted this in a July 14 X post, in which he shared a picture of what he dubbed a Russian road of death. Euromaidan Press provides more details, noting that this 2-mile stretch of road is now home to a staggering 150 destroyed Russian vehicles, all of which appear to be heading west towards the village of Shevchenko, which is just a handful of miles away from Pokrovsk. The strategy seems simple: take the village and Russia can launch assaults from Pokrovsk south. In practice, that strategy has led to a wrecked Russian vehicle every 70 feet along the road of death. Ukraine has essentially shut down that road to the extent that it was able to use its drones to fend off a Russian force about 20 times the size of the one guarding Shevchenko back in December 2024. But what's really being seen here is the completely reckless disregard Putin has for Russia's mechanized units. 150 destroyed vehicles across a 2-mile stretch of road reveal that Russia's leader appears to think that there will always be more where they came from that he can use to assault Ukraine. He's wrong, and Putin's mistake is the reason why Russians are now carrying landmines on their backs. The reality is that Russia is starting to run out of the mechanized units it would have previously used to transport landmines to the front. Ukraine's Ministry of Finance reveals the extent of the problem with its casualty counter, which is updated daily. As of August 4, Russia has lost 11,069 tanks, 23,079 armored vehicles, and 57,244 cars and cisterns. The latter two categories include vehicles that Russia would have used to transport landmines, and the losses are so catastrophic that Russia simply can't replace them. Both the National Security Journal and Novaya Gazeta says that's the case. The former reveals that Russia is building just 200 new BMP-3 armored vehicles and 90 T-90M tanks per year, meaning that almost every mechanized unit the country is fielding in Ukraine has been pulled from Soviet-era stockpiles. Those stockpiles aren't infinite. While they've been enough to carry Russia through about 3 years of warfare, the storage yards that once held tens of thousands of vehicles are now depleted, with only the dregs remaining. Novaya Gazeta builds on this, noting that Russia only has 46% of its pre-war reserves of tanks, 48% of its armored vehicles, and 42% of its infantry fighting vehicles. While those may seem like okay numbers on the surface, bear in mind that most of what's left over in Russia's storage facilities are the vehicles that were in such terrible states of disrepair that they couldn't be sent to the front lines. Russia will have to cannibalize its existing vehicles to get more up and running, raising the rate of attrition to the point where it will be out of mechanized units entirely by the end of 2025. At least, that's according to the Institute for the Study of War, Novaya Gazeta reports. Even if the 2025 deadline isn't quite accurate, it's clear that Russia has a mechanized units problem, and the effects of that problem are starting to play out on the battlefield. Before, Russian soldiers have been seen being forced to assault Ukraine's defenses on foot. Now those same assaults are taking place, with the added bonus of the infantry being forced to carry landmines in a vain hope that they'll reach the front lines without being blown up. This is desperation in spades. So Ukraine's brilliant drone-based tactics, cutting Russian troops from their supply lines, and a lack of mechanized units are a 1-2 punch, leading to Russian troops being forced to carry landmines on their backs. But there are also psychological factors at play, starting with the kamikaze effects that come with what Russia's soldiers are doing. In its July 31 report, Euromaidan Press points out that the Russian command's decision to start strapping landmines to its troops wasn't made with the intention of turning them into unwilling suicide bombers. But that's what's happening anyway. Every time a mine-carrying soldier is hit, they become a weapon. Most of the time, that weapon is exploding in isolation, adding the finishing touch to a death that's already in progress. However, the Russian command will likely be more than happy if it ever receives news that a Russian soldier carrying a mine ends up exploding close enough to Ukrainian soldiers that they manage to take a few of them out. Even unintentionally destroying a drone or piece of Ukrainian equipment might be seen as a win. After all, that's what mines are supposed to do. Putin won't care if those mines happen to be strapped to one of his soldiers when they explode. It's this callous attitude toward human life that has led to Russia thinking that creating vests to carry mines is a good idea in the first place. And it's a sort of callousness that's seen constantly, both in the kamikaze aspect and the general churn of Russian soldiers. For instance, June 30 saw the Guardian report that it's not just its own soldiers that Russia is forcing into becoming unintentional suicide bombers. It's doing the same to people inside Ukraine. The method raises questions, and the answers lie in the fact that some Ukrainians are willing to do Putin's dirty work inside their own country. Only the work they end up doing is far dirtier than they expected. The Guardian reports on a 19-year-old Ukrainian named Ole, who it says was paid $1,000 by Russia to launch a paint attack on a police station. Ole was given a bag, which he was likely told contained the paint he would need for the job. However, when Ole arrived at the station, the bag exploded, taking him with it. Russia had lied to the teenager. A crude explosive had been packed into the bag, and just like what's now being seen on the front lines with Russia's soldiers, Ole had been used to transport an explosive toward a target on foot. The Centre for European Policy Analysis reported on the same tactic back in April. It cited several more examples, including that of a 15-year-old girl who'd been tricked into a suicide attack by Russians who promised payment and then loaded her thermos with a bomb that would have taken her life if Ukrainian intelligence hadn't uncovered the attack before it happened. The parallels aren't exact, but they're strong enough to demonstrate that Russia is desperate enough to start turning soldiers and unwitting Ukrainians into suicide bombers. It may signal that Russia is beginning to more openly embrace a kamikaze approach as its equipment issues come to bear. That shouldn't be too much of a surprise. As already mentioned, Putin places almost no value on the human lives he's expending in Ukraine. Russia broke through the 1 million casualty mark toward the end of June and has added a little over 58,000 more since then. And don't for a second think that a Russian soldier likely has the option of saying no when they're ordered to carry landmines on their backs. As Euronews noted back in October 2023, the US has already accused Russia of executing soldiers who failed to follow orders, which today could include orders as ludicrous as run toward Ukraine's drones with landmines strapped to your back. Death on a massive scale is built into Putin's plan. At this point, such widespread death is practically baked into the very fabric of Russia's military. It's the callous approach mentioned several times already, though in the case of strapping mines to its soldiers' backs, it's a callousness that's tinged with more than a hint of desperation. Putin simply doesn't care. If his soldiers don't have vehicles, they can run. If mines need to go to the front line, those running soldiers can carry them. And if those soldiers explode, well, there are always more where they came from. The odds are that seeing soldiers carrying mines on their backs may become an increasingly common practice as the issues just highlighted become even more prevalent. After all, Russia has no intention of stopping using mines. It's already turned Ukraine into one of the world's most mine-contaminated countries, with the United Nations noting that Russia and Ukraine have combined to scatter millions of the explosive weapons on the Ukrainian battlefield. There are now 5 mines for every 10.76 square feet of Ukraine, United 24 Media reported in April, so there's no chance that Putin is going to suddenly decide to stop laying them. They'll just be laid slower because they're being carried on foot by troops who are exploding under Ukraine's drone fire more often than they reach the front lines where the mines are needed. And speaking of drones, therein lies another problem for Russia's unfortunate mine carriers. It's Ukraine's drones that are stopping those soldiers in their tracks, and there are hundreds of thousands of them on the battlefield. On August 4, the Defense Post reported that Ukraine has officially delivered 1 million drones to its military during the first half of 2025. It's shooting for about 4 million built and ready to go by the end of 2025, aided by investment from its Western partners. The drones aren't going anywhere, and as seen from the road of death mentioned earlier, Ukraine is getting better and better at funneling Russian soldiers into kill zones where they can be taken out by drones. Think about what that means for the troops who are now being tasked with carrying Russia's landmines on their backs. Ukraine can use drones, mines and other defenses to guide them into areas where artillery and yet more drones await. In the past, those soldiers would have died due to Ukraine's weapons. Now, there's just as much of a chance of them exploding due to the mines on their backs as they're being chased down by Ukraine's never-ending hordes of drones. And it's not just in forcing his soldiers to self-explode that Putin demonstrates his complete lack of regard for the people he expects to win his war for him. In Toretsk, Putin has already sacrificed 50,000 soldiers to the failed capture of a city that Ukraine is bravely defending. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the newest and dumbest tactics Russia is using in its war against Ukraine.